Good afternoon, everybody. We're glad that you are with us for another broadcast, another stream of the conversation. And we're talking about double standards again. This is part two. And we have our all-star crew who was back with us to give us some more of those fire takes that each one of them has. And we've already started even before this. And I know it'll probably continue on after this, but we are in store for a great one on today. We have, like I said, some regulars that are with us. We have Dr. Allison Powell Hicks and Shindell Seal. And we have Randy Goldson, who is with us, and Dr. Uhuru Williams is on his way, and he will be here in just a moment. And we also have Jerome Crichton, who is back with us again. And we just want to say hello to each and every one of you. You know that I am Pastor Michael Jenkins, the administrative pastor at Kansas Avenue. We have Pastor McBride, who was with us, the youth pastor at Kansas, and in the background, Pastor Keith Morris, the senior pastor, keeping everything on the rails. Let's bow and have a word of prayer, then we're going to get right into it. Father in heaven, we are grateful to be back this afternoon, and we pray that you would guide us, that your spirit would be with us, and that not only would we be able to express ourselves, but that we can even come with some solutions and answers and some practical things that we can do as we move forward. We thank you now in the name of Jesus, we pray. Amen. As I said, we're talking about double standards. And if you know, in February, Black History Month, we had this crew come on and just talk to us about some things that were taking place. And, you know, we look at double standards and they're all around us when it comes to how Black people are treated in American society, when it comes to law, even when it comes to finances and banking, when it comes to so many different things. And so that is our topic again on today. And I just want to get into some things, and we're going to get there in just a moment, but I want to remind everybody who's watching, share this because it's so important. Share it from YouTube, share it from Facebook, and make sure that the people that you know are watching. Let them know that, hey, the conversation is going on right now. Now, I want to show some things to those who are with us, and then we'll get into some of the other questions that we didn't get to in our last conversation together in the month of February. But there's some interesting things that are taking place right now, and many people are watching this trial of Derek Chauvin. It's being broadcast live on many different channels, and some people can watch it and they're commenting on it. Others like me can't stand to watch it because I can't be mad all day. So I haven't watched any of it, but I've seen the takes that other people have put up. And so this trial is going on in Minnesota. We know what happened with George Floyd last year when Derek Chauvin was kneeling on his neck for a long period of time, and George Floyd passed away. And there were many protests following that, and many calls for police reform, and people were saying defund the police, and many things were coming out of this. But Minnesota has been quite famous for some things as of late. If you all remember this, when Philando Castile was shot, he said that he was pulled over and he had his girlfriend with him and their child in the back seat. And Philando said, I have a firearm with me and I have a concealed carry permit, and some things went down, and this officer Yanez ended up killing Philando Castile, and he was acquitted of this and said to be paid $48,500 in a buyout. Later on in the same state of Minnesota, this officer, Mohammed Noor, ended up shooting and killing this lady here. And he went to trial and he was convicted and put in prison for what had taken place. And this happened in Minnesota. So we have this officer and clearly a Black officer, both committing the same act, but getting different results. And so we're talking about double standards today. And as I put this out here, and we're looking at this trial of Derek Chauvin, there's a possibility that he could be acquitted. And so I want to ask those who are on our panel today just to talk to us about this. If Derek Chauvin, a white officer, is acquitted for being accused of killing, and we all saw the video of George Floyd, what happens? What do we do as a people? Should we have more protest in the streets? Are we going to have another Rodney King situation and the burning of a city? Should we protest? Should we riot? Should we vote? What happens next? We're looking at double standards, and we've all seen plenty of white officers who kill Black people that are unarmed get off. And we've seen Black officers or even Black people commit crimes and the book is thrown at them. So what happens when this trial is over if Derek Chauvin is let off? Talk to us. Who wants to go first today?
All right, I can start off. I mean, it is a reality that I think is at the back of many people's minds right now. You know, even as painful as it is to, you know, kind of watch the proceedings, you know, listen to experts testimony, particularly Dr. Tobin, who kind of talk about how you take life out of a man. That's essentially what he talked about from the perspective of the respiratory system. And people are looking and they're listening to the prosecution's case, and we're, pretty much saying, yeah, this is a done deal. We all saw it with our eyes. But it's kind of an ambivalent take, because the reality being history, the record shows that officers more than often get off than get
Yeah.
convicted. So what
Yeah.
happens?
We all saw Rodney King with our own eyes, right?
There we go. So what
Yeah.
happens next? What happens next is totally up to the judiciary system. What happens next is totally up to people who say they're fair-minded, people who say they are for justice. What happens next in this country? Uh, I mean, what people will do if there's a not guilty verdict is pretty much take it to the streets. That's the reality. It is going to happen. It doesn't have to, but it is a reality. And I think there are different people in positions of power who are bracing for this reality. So I'm hoping that justice will be done, and that Black folks can feel like, for once, the justice system is standing up for what is right. So I too, I'm bracing for what might happen should there be a not guilty verdict.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, when we consider that the laws, the judiciary, all of that is replete with loopholes for everything, right? So we saw it with our eyes, but there is more than likely some type of judicial or legislative loophole that somebody's going to pull out of the back of their pockets, and then they're going to present it. Let's say that does go down, and let's say that, yeah, he does get acquitted. I am sick of protesting. I am sick of demanding blah blah blah, because like we were talking about earlier, you cannot expect somebody who will be disadvantaged by your liberation to liberate you. And this is the country that we live in. We live in a country where your very existence is resistance to their comfort level. And so this is why we're over militarized. This is why the judicial system has been put in place to keep you subjugated. It's not, I mean, the expectation that Black people have that there will be some semblance of justice. I mean, even if he did go to jail, the reality is that there are going to be 50 more of him who will not. So that expectation needs to really, really resonate with Black people in America and across the world in countries that are dominated by white people, that this is the reality of it. What do you do as a group of Black people? How do you unite? How do you create that level of power where we don't have to protest? We don't have to demand justice from people who are, always giving us injustice. I mean, how that's a very, very provocative question.
I'd like and that is a question. But go ahead, Craig.
If I'm able. In terms of what people will do if there's a not guilty verdict, I don't know. I mean, we only have history to inform us as to what could possibly happen. I'm more concerned with why it happens and how to prevent it from happening. Black folk everywhere put up with too much garbage from white folk. We don't hold them accountable. It's in your school, it's on your job, it's in the supermarket, it's every place you turn, because this white pathology is very real. And they have created a reality around these distortions that now cause us to be in what I would call a Looney Tune season. When you have people like Mitch McConnell and Mike McCarthy and Ted Cruz and
Cancun Cruz
and these other folk, right? We're in a Looney Tune season where they have fomented the big lie and will never be held accountable for their part in it. They edged Trump on. We're living in a Looney Tune season, right? Where lies masquerade as truth and truth can't get a hearing. So the solution is before it comes to these trials. And the solution is with each of us every day, to the degree that we are complicit in enabling these folk from acting stupidly, and we do not confront them and hold them accountable. We have created the problem that we want to have an adverse reaction to.
But then we have
I absolutely agree.
Our own people. We have a lot of our own people who are coddling this.
Yeah, but I absolutely agree. I think without systematic reform to the legal system, to the housing system, to the financial system, even if Chauvin is found guilty, even if they put him in jail, even if they give him the death penalty, it's not enough. There's too many other areas of our lives that are impacted by white supremacy, by the myth of white supremacy, not even truly it's white fragility. And I think that, and that's a more difficult problem. It's the idea that like Bruce's Beach, right? Manhattan Beach, now wanting to give Bruce's Beach back 100 years later.
Right.
Like, is that enough? No, the money that family missed out on, it's just, there's so many things that need to happen that sometimes I'm even overwhelmed by where do we start? There's this psychological principle that when you're given too many options, you make no decisions. And that there's too many areas that we need to work on, that need to be fixed because of this original sin of white folks bringing us here for greed and finance and slavery, all of the things that happened. How do we actually correct it? Because this one case, I'm sorry, I don't care if they throw the entire book at him. It's nowhere near enough.
But where do we start? You know, we're kind of all saying the same thing, that at some point we have to hold white folk accountable, and that we have to have some change, that protesting is not enough. We've done that and nothing has happened. So where do we start? We have to have some ideas. And though we may have all these different places that we can say, okay, stay here, there, and everywhere, and then not make a decision, we have to narrow it down to something so that change can happen. And Crichton, you said that and we've got to stop it before it starts. How exactly does that happen?
It happens by holding white people accountable in all of these places where Black folk are so busy trying to climb up the ladder that they're willing to compromise truth and integrity in order to do so. So, first of all, we have to acknowledge that we have to be clear that white folk have this disease. It's called white pathology. It is the product of a very warped socialization that has taken place for over 400 years. It is so deep that it is not only social, it is biological, it's genetic. We know through the study of epigenetics that people's behavior is affected, you know, by the social environments, and it's passed on genetically. So we have to, as a people, acknowledge that white people are basically sick, and that their worldview is very much warped, which is what is responsible for this Looney Tune season that we're in, which also has as one of its components this social programming that takes place through the media. Some of you have noticed that there are a lot of commercials on now with interracial couples, and essentially they began with white women. I'm sorry. White women with Black men. Only recently have they started to have Black men with white women, but it's in a lot of these techie commercials. So we have to understand what's going on. But beyond that, I heard somebody say it's not our job to convince white people about racism or to educate them about racism. They need to take care of that. No, not true. No more than you leave alcoholism into the hands of an alcoholic, or drug addiction into the hands of a drug addict. We need to help to educate white folk, to drag them out of this spiritual deficit, so that they can understand that there is such a thing as integrity and compassion and empathy and all of these other things that are so absent from their social culture.
You know, it's interesting what you said, Dr. Crichton, about holding white people accountable. I think the first thing we need to do is hold ourselves accountable, because when we're focusing on white people and their pathology. We know, I think almost every Black person knows that white people crazy, right? We'll say that. We have all of our little things about saying, yeah, that's some white stuff right there. We know what's going on, but we don't hold ourselves accountable. We're not courageous enough, I think. I think a lot of times when we think about, oh, well, you know what? If I say this, then now I may be damaged, or I may put myself in a precarious situation, or I may XYZ, whatever, or my kids may suffer by it. We're not courageous enough to say, you know what, this behavior is inexcusable, and we do need to look at what we are willing to risk in order to address that situation. Now, this is my job. I actually educate those techie companies every day on the inequities that our legal system, that historically Black people, marginalized groups, throughout the world have experienced. It is fascinating to me, the lack of knowledge that they have regarding the acts that they and their forefathers have done. And then how they're just astonished that people can be so okay right now, having gone through these things historically. And this is why I think Black people have been in the situation that they're in, because you're right, Dr. Crichton. We have not burned this bad boy down, because if they had gone through what we have gone through for 400 years, the whole land would have been rearranged, okay? Rearranging some furniture, seriously. So this is where we need to look at, okay, what am I willing to lose? What reputation am I willing to risk to make this thing happen? It definitely rests on us, not on them, because they're going to keep doing what they're doing.
If I can,
Shindale, I have a question. Go ahead. But I have a question that's directed directly to Shindale. But go ahead, and then I'll get to it after that.
I was going to say.
Sorry.
Randy, and then Allison, then I'll get back to Shindale.
Sure. So 2 quick things. So one, there's an author, Ezra Aharon, in his book, Sovereign Evolution, talks about the relationship of the government to the governed, and particularly Black people. And he talks about the fact that Black people have to prod, protest, and fight to get rights in this country. That constitutes an unprincipled relationship. That's an important point to notice. There's another book called Conditional Citizenship by Layla Lahman. I don't remember her last name. Lalami, I think. And she makes this point anyhow about the fact that rich white men were to be ruled by consent, but everyone else by force. So when we talk about the worldview, the psyche, the psychology that drive the behavior, the dispositions that drive the institutions, this is where it is. And if we're going to have any change, we need shift in narrative. So we have to construct our own narratives as well, as sort of to combat harmful narratives perpetuated by white people about Black people and about themselves as well, right? So we have to challenge the very construct of the society and have this complete narrative shift if we're going to have any kind of solution to the problem.
Yeah, but beautiful. All of y'all had wonderful things to say. And my perspective is filtered through my primary lens, which is one of psychotherapy and mental health. And I'm a big believer in as above, so below. And so in the mental health space, when working with a client, a lot of clients will sit down and they'll ask you, well, what do we fix first? Which is your question. And what research has shown us in the therapeutic space, it doesn't matter where you start, because healing is generative. Healing begins to generalize. Once you begin to heal one area, other areas begin to heal. And so when it comes to the Black community, I think sometimes because our problem is, like in Spanish, the word is lío, which means like a big knotted up, like when you have like a Christmas ball, like when your Christmas lights get tangled up and there's no beginning and there's no end. And the more you tug on this part, the more it tightens over here. And the more you tug on that part, the more it tightens somewhere else. And you just want to throw the whole thing in the trash and start over. Well, we can't throw ourselves in the trash. We can't throw this experience in the trash. It is something that we have been born into and we have to deal with. And so sometimes by nature of having so many places with which to start, we end up arguing about the process as opposed to starting. And I believe that no matter where we start, it will yield healing and it will yield change. But starting in one place, whether that be with incarceration and saying, you know what, we're focusing on incarceration, we're changing it, or starting with redlined areas, if we start there, we're going to fix it. Or it's starting with, police brutality or whatever area whatever of the millions of areas we could choose to start with. I believe that starting to pull those threads will loosen the whole sweater.
But
and so
how
I
do
think
you
it's about
heal?
moving forward.
How do you heal when the harm is recurring? And
I think that you have to get to that when we get to it. We might not heal. I'm not talking about something that's happening in my lifetime. It might be my great-great-grandkids that because of something great-great-grandma Allison did, maybe they get to heal. Maybe I don't get to. Maybe I get to live this life and maybe I have to be upset. Maybe I have to cry. Maybe I have to be sad, but that my sadness can yield some beautiful movement because I refuse to allow my kids and their kids and their kids to experience this. This might not change in my lifetime. Didn't change in Martin's. And
let me ask you all about.
I don't think Martin was doing it right, but that's my.
Let me ask you about voting.
Sorry.
No. But let's get to this double standard in voting because
well, you were going to ask me a question.
Yeah, I'm getting to that right now. I'm getting to that right now. There's this double standard in voting, and Shindell, I know how you feel about voting. You were reiterating some of these things before we went live, and so I want you to kind of get into some of that. We saw what happened in Georgia just recently. That Stacey Abrams has been big and gotten the vote out. And in Georgia, they got 2 new senators, Democratic senators, and the people are feeling good. And then the Republican people in Georgia went and made some changes, to how you can vote and pretty much, repress the ability to vote in Georgia. Now there's a lot of talk about that. It's even illegal to give people food and water while they're standing in line to vote. And of course, they closed down voting places in minority neighborhoods so that the people have to stand in long lines all day, right? And so there's a double standard even in how you can vote in the state of Georgia. A lot of times we talk about certain things that will help us in our upward mobility. Education is one thing, and I want to get into that. But voting right now, we talk about voting. Get out and vote and vote and vote and vote and vote. Now in Georgia, we would say, oh, they did a good thing. At least minorities, Black people did a good thing. They got a Black senator and another Democratic senator. And so many would say that the vote worked and it's going to help the people. But I know, Shindell, you have some different takes on voting. And I want you all to comment on this, give us all your perspective on this. Should voting be something that we're looking forward to getting involved in as a healing process, as we've been talking about, or an answer to some things that we're dealing with? And if not, then what should we do? And Shindell, I want you to go first and just talk to us about that. Of course, these are your views, but just share with us, some of the things that you've been talking to us about before.
Well, I think that it was really encouraging, first of all, to see Black people unified in such, with such precision, right? It was beautiful to see. What I would have liked to have seen was them unified with precision behind a vetted candidate that really was going to do something for them. And what we've been seeing, and if we had such a thing, right? What we've been seeing, though, is that we have been encouraged. We've been threatened to vote now that we can vote, right? Threatened to vote. You have to vote. Otherwise, it's going to go back to Jim Crow, blah, 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 which, that's what happened in Georgia, right? So I think that when we as Black people look to what our future holds, we have historically been very, very been nonchalant. Since we got the vote, we've been nonchalant about the vote because Democrats, quote unquote, LBJ, gave you the vote. They gave you this thing. So now you are beholden to them, regardless of what they don't do for you. The Republican Party, the same thing. You've got Black Republicans, you've got Black Democrats. We do not have a party that serves us well because let's look at the numbers. Let's look at the stats. From the time Black people have been able to vote, things have just gone, they're downhill. They're downhill. And, we can say we've got more people in school. We really don't. We can say we've got, better economic, blah, blah, blah. That's for some. And that's now where we are stuck. Because now that they're able to let us work with them, which is really what the civil rights movement was about. Now we'll just let you come and spend your money with us. Now we'll just come and let you work with us. Now we are voting in ways that does not serve us. We're voting for people that do not serve us. They don't come to the Black community to get your feedback on what would really work for Black people. They come to your community so that you see their face and you feel like they're going to hear you. And so you'll vote for them, because as soon as you vote, you don't see them again.
Now, are you saying the same for every candidate? Because Raphael
Yes.
Warnock,
I
is
mean,
a Black
think about
man
it.
from Georgia, Ebenezer
Think about
Baptist
it.
Church, all these things.
Think about it. Just even look at our neighborhoods. Look at our neighborhoods. Look at our schools. Look at the fact that we only have 7% Black teachers in America. Look at the fact that we can't get into colleges. Why do we need all of these opportunity zones and all this kind of stuff when we've got Black candidates, when we've got Black congresspeople? They are not working for us. We are not vetting them properly. We look at them, they look like us, we vote for them. Or we have a candidate who says, oh yeah, I'm all about you, I'm all about you. They do a few little things here, and then we vote for them and we don't see them again. And our communities are still the same. They're still
Now, when
we're
Barack
not holding them
Obama
accountable.
was running, Black people, we can look back on his presidency and say,
Mm-hmm.
okay, now Black people didn't benefit all that much. But Barack Obama was saying, okay, I'm a candidate for everybody. I'm the American president, not just the president of Black people. Is it all right for a Black person or any candidate to say that I am working for everybody, and that I have to make compromises across the board, or
That's
I can only do
inequitable,
this or do that?
Yeah, that's inequitable.
And I want the rest of you to jump in and talk to us too.
Yeah,
Oh, I'm sorry.
If I may say, some years ago, I used to coach Pop Warner football. My son was on the team, and I was one of the coaches. And we went from the inner city to play in a playoff game against a team in the suburbs in Gilroy, just north of Sacramento. And we were putting a serious whooping on them. And as the clock began to wind down, lo and behold, guess what they did? The referees started to change the rules of the game and to start making calls, which ended up with us losing the game. Now, what I'm going to say, I'm going to talk plainly, as I usually do, so you all can understand very clearly what I'm saying. I am sick of sick white folk. When you start doing what you're supposed to do, they are going to start changing the rules. We saw that in Georgia. And so we talk about voting. That's obviously not the solution. Even though Raphael Warnock and the other senator were elected from the state of Georgia, as soon as that happened, what did they do? They started to change the rules. Until the sickness, this pathology that white folk have, is addressed, and until we start to deal with some of our own who have the same affliction, nothing will change significantly. And this is the source of the problem. So voting is good. But if we think by any stretch of the imagination that it solves the problems, it doesn't. As long as we have white folk that have this pathology, the problems will continue to multiply.
As an outsider who has been observing American politics for some time now, one of the observations I've made is that American politics is really conservative in the sense that the system is designed to function in a certain way, and it's not open or to changes, to big, bold ideas and initiatives that will benefit the majority as opposed to the privileged few. And we've seen this with kind of the entrenching of neoliberal ideas into the American way of doing business, economics, governance. And whenever centrist, neoliberal, or a kind of a broad tent approach is taken to anything within American politics, it oftentimes disadvantages people who are already disadvantaged, namely Black people. So it is good to vote, but I don't think we have reached a critical mass where we're putting in the right number of candidates who have the interests of Black people at heart. You put a few, and the system puts them in check, keeps them in check, puts them in line. You need to have a national movement whereby folks, black or white or brown, who have the interest of black people at heart, are elected to serve black communities and put forward the cause of black people. And the fundamental thing for me is really, how do you take power away from someone or a group of people who have no intention on giving up power? How do you do that?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mercy.
Well, the challenge is now, though, for real, though, is our black agenda, whatever that may be, and that's super air quotes, is so convoluted, right? Because before, like I said, you know, when we had Du Bois and we had Booker and all that, they were like, yeah, we've got to fight this oppression. We've got to fight Jim Crow. We've got to fight all this stuff, right? Everybody was unified under that. Now it's like, well, you know, we've got all of these different things we need to hit, like Ali was saying, first. Then we go to this second. Then we go, because all Black lives matter. We've got trans lives. We've got Black women. We've got these different Black people. We've got, and we, you know, unless everyone is free, no one is free. And I mean, I can get down with that, right? I can get down with saying that, you know, the fewer or the lesser of us definitely needs to be addressed. But the challenge is then we don't, like Ali said, make the decision. We don't say, this is our agenda. This is our piece. Now let's unify behind that. Let's find candidates who are vetted, who can make those, who can really get into the system and do the things that are needed for Black people. But the problem is, like Dr. Goldson said, as soon as they get into the system, those pockets get lined, they get bought, and we're out of there. So, so this voting thing, voting, like Brother Goldson said, is for the rule of the consent, right? It is like, okay, well, I'm going to consent to you representing me, and I need you to represent me the way that I want to be represented. Otherwise, I'm going to kick you out. Black people have not gotten together and understood that and executed ourselves that way.
Yeah, I will think it's a part of it is because I think the problems have grown so exponentially, right? Because that's kind of how growth works in some opportunities and some experiences. It's skyrocketed, and I think our challenge is because our lives have opened up a little since civil rights. What we've been excluded from has now been made more apparent. And I think yet again, just, you know, finding that one inroads could be something helpful, because I think when you are a Black person who's now elected to the Senate or elected to your council or whatever it is you're in, I don't know if all of them have their pockets lined, because I have a hard time saying that. But I think what happens is you realize the system wasn't built for us in a very real way. And you realize that no matter how hard you try this, they shoot it down. You don't have enough friends over here. So like talking about Biden being friends with these Dixiecrats, you know, in the South, you almost have to be friends with your enemy in politics, because if you're not, how do you get anything done? And I think that we learn quickly through fire that this is not what we thought it was, that this political game is a little more game of cards than we thought. And it's really complex, and not to say that we can't do it, but you know, like even like in the fact in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, in the city where all of this went down, there was a Black man in charge of the police department, you know, and that doesn't necessarily mean that he was able to change anything, because these structures, these rules have been set up around him to keep him hobbled, to keep him from moving forward. And so I think that there is definitely a lot of layers to this, and I can't say that everyone's getting their pockets lined. Someone is, but a lot of people, I think, are just feeling disenfranchised.
This is true. Also,
go ahead, Crichton, and then I'm going to shift.
True also for Stacey Abrams, right? She did all that she did, and these two senators got elected. Now, what people want to boycott the state of Georgia, which would definitely have brought Georgia to its knees in terms of at least having to consider changing its policies. But she can't take that stand. Why? Because there's too much at stake. Right? She's positioning herself to become the governor of Georgia. She can't take that stand to boycott Georgia. You see? So it is layered. And you're right, Dr. Ali. This is layered. It's complex. It's really not that easy. And much of what is done politically is done in local communities. But, you know, those leaders who do stand and do have the best interest of the community at heart, they can't get past those local areas. Why? Because this broad network still exists, and it's very difficult to permeate it and to make any change. So rather than looking at whole systems changes, there needs to be changes at the individual level, in the high schools, in the colleges, in the workplaces, in the medical buildings. We've got to stop letting white folk be bullies, and stop being hyper vigilant, and stop, giving them permission to do what they do. It's got to start at that level for any significant change to come.
And really where I saw it significantly is in the schools. A lot of my research focuses on what our textbooks have said historically. And so this lends to, and what they say now. And what this lends to is what the teachers who are teaching our kids right now have learned, what has been messaged to them, what's been embedded in them, and what was embedded in the people who taught them. It's an entire systematic approach to ensuring that a group of people believe that they are less valued and or less worthy, and that they are to be a part of an underclass, a permanent underclass. Because right out of the emancipation, Black students were being taught, you were meant to be a slave. Like literally, that's what the teachers were teaching them. You were meant to be a slave. This is how slaves act. I mean, they actually have the texts. Now we're looking at medical textbooks now that just just were pulled off the shelves in 2018, saying this is how you apply anesthesia to Black people, because Black people, they look forward to pain. They think that God has given them pain to help them be more faithful. This is how
Who said that?
Oh, girl,
what book said that? What?
Oh yeah, it was a nursing book. Yes. Yes, it has the list.
The flag has been pulled now.
Burning, book burning.
It was Pearson Publishers. They actually had to pull it. And it had how you apply anesthesia for Jews, how you apply anesthesia for Latinos, for Asians, Native Americans. And it told you literally why they get less anesthesia or more. Oh, Jews always complain about everything, so you probably want to give them more anesthesia. I mean, literally, that's what it was saying.
So just put me under Jewish, because I
all
complain.
of the things,
Put me under that then, if that's the case.
Like I actually presented as a case study for a lot of the classes that I teach. I have a copy of that page. And so it's something that when we think that we're post-racial or we've had civil rights. No,
the fact that they're typing everybody. Oh my God.
Yeah. All right, we're getting ready to shift this a little bit, okay? So
no, let me ask this question real quick, Doc.
All right,
right before you switch up.
Yeah.
You have a group of people who are watching us right now. They're not very educated, and I'm not trying to point any fingers at anybody. They don't have the ability to look through the books like you guys are doing, or like we all are doing, read them and things of that nature, and come up with these systematic plans. Would it be a wrong thing to guide their hand of violence? What I mean by that, I'm gonna go back to your last question, Jenkins, or your very first question. If Chauvin were to win, would there riot? Shindell, you said you're tired of rioting. There is a group of individuals who are not tired of rioting. They are ready to go. Should we direct them where they should go riot and help save our communities in terms of
saving the community?
Don't burn down our communities, but head over yonder, cross the railroad tracks, get over the river.
Our community. Yeah.
Listen, you are setting them up to be another George Floyd. Okay, yeah, that's what you're setting them up to be. Because I'm gonna tell you now, anybody that goes and riots on that now remember, they have changed the laws significantly since the Black Lives Matter protests during the summer. They have now given police and military the authority to shoot on sight if they feel threatened. We're not in pre-George Floyd, we're in post-George Floyd, where it is extremely different. So anybody who is upset at the Chauvin case or anything like that, I am not going to direct anybody to go protest. I'm not going to direct anybody to go burn stuff. I'm not going to direct anybody to do anything like that. What I'm going to direct them to do is actually really think about, and I know people want to act, but this is a part of maturing, of us helping our people learn how to better direct their anger and their efforts, because we have not been doing that in a strategic and in a precise way. And this is why we keep having these same things over and over and over again. We've got to find a way, and I think we understand the way, to actually direct our energies in a constructive manner. And it's definitely not voting. It's in really looking in your communities and figuring out how you can create systems that keep these things from happening. I'm down with reallocating funds from the police. I'm definitely down with that. But I mean, I would never say go out there and fight and burn and all that kind of stuff.
All right, just look quickly at some of the reaction to the whatever they call the Jim Crow 2.0 in Georgia. Once folks started to say we are going to boycott these businesses, they started to speak up and speak out. And I think from the civil rights period, we've learned that the Black dollars matter, and that's where our strength really lies. How we can pull, how we can redeploy, how we can take back our economic value. Because the reality is that the nation requires and needs Black bodies working in order to be productive, in order for the nation to have all this it's cheap labor essentially, and they need that. And so Black people have to remember that, our dollars do matter, and that's one way we can fight back within the system. Is to take it from these communities that we're giving it to, give it to our own community.
Yeah, but
I think now we're still a permanent consumer class, right?
If you look at the problem in a state like Georgia, I think it's a little bit more complex than that. When you start boycotting in Georgia, you are largely affecting the lives of Black people. I think we really need to think about that. I mean, I'm all for the boycott. I'm all for sticking it to the establishment in terms of economics, but it's not something that we can just turn away from and not take a good look at. We're hurting Black folk when we start to boycott. And this is why I continue to say the problem is solved at the basic grassroots level. When Black folk change their attitude about kissing up to white folk and being hypervigilant and letting them off the hook, things will begin to change.
Amen.
Here,
I'm going to flip it. I'm going to change it.
LA,
Let me change it a little bit, Shindell. Let me get in there and change this a little bit. So we're going to direct this back to the police. And Shindell, you kind of said a little bit about it before, about defunding the police. We all know what happened in Ferguson just a couple of years ago in Ferguson, Missouri, and some of the things that happened. And we saw the militarization of police. So a man got his hands up. What are police doing? Why do they need all this equipment, guns and bulletproof vests and all this for a man who's got his hands up and is clearly unarmed, right? And this is from that same Ferguson riots and things that were going on. And we saw the police roll up in tanks and night vision goggles and bulletproof vests and all these types of things. And so we look at the police and we're looking at this trial and what's going on in Minnesota. And some people are saying that the U.S. justice system is on trial with Derek Chauvin. So one question I have is, do you believe that? And then the other question I have is about police. Defunding the police. Is this an answer to one of our ills? Defunding the police or really reallocating those funds to other places? What should we do? Because there's definitely a double standard when it comes to policing Black people and white people in America. We saw that when there was an attack on the U.S. Capitol. People broke windows and marched in and beat police with flagpoles, and then they walked out and went home. And then here in Ferguson, Missouri, a Black man's got his hands up. Police are right there in his face with guns and bulletproof vests and all these other things. It's definitely a double standard. Is the American justice system on trial, or is that just something that people are saying? If Derek Chauvin is convicted, will anything change? And so what do we do? Where do we go from here?
The judicial system comes out of people. Until the hearts of the people change, the judicial system cannot. Because Because with the Trayvon Martin case, for example, the perspective of the jurors on the violence and the violent nature of Black men is what shaped and rechanged that. And we can't necessarily force the jury to see things in a different way because they're people. It's a collection of people. Judges are just people. And they have some leeway in the way that they dispense sentences. But there are people, like there's studies that find that people get heavier sentences around lunchtime if a judge is hungry because they're people. And until we change the empathy and the soul of the human, like I'm coming with you, Dr. Crichton, until we change the perspective of the individual and until we give America its soul, because let's establish not back, because America never had one. Okay, the America that we know that's been colonized never had a soul. But until we establish one, until we have a shared amount of empathy, we're not going to see a change in the judicial system because it's just a reflection of our country. The illness is not the judicial system. The judicial system is a representation of the illness in America.
I agree with your perspective, but I want to shift a little bit because I do believe that there is a way in which people, yes, build systems. They're reified through practice and iteration. They take on a life of their own, such that injustice can be built into the very fabric of the system, regardless of the people, right? And that comes up in terms of the laws, in terms of just how the category of the juridical functions. And so I think there is room for a dismantling of some aspect or a good amount of the judiciary system so that justice itself, this idea of justice being blind, Lady Justice, right? Her eyes are covered. That is kind of the narrative that has allowed for lots of the bias and the injustice itself to remain in the system. So yes, people are driving it, but I think the way in which the system itself is structured and the category has now come to function required that, the thing be dismantled so that justice can really come forth.
Yeah, the justice system has long been the arm of private enterprise. All you got to do is go back. It's never been about justice. It's been about locking up Black people to make money. And until we understand this, nothing is going to change. There's no such thing. American justice on trial. What is this? The trial, a 400-year trial? I mean, give me a break.
I don't believe that the justice system, I mean, all that talk is just something, it's interesting to say, but like Crichton said, it's corporations that run our country, right? It's corporations that run the world. It has nothing to do with our judicial system or our political system. Right? It's corporations that run the world. Whenever a candidate or a congressperson starts going to the left, and and I know, Allie, you don't want to think that people's pockets are lying, but as soon as they start going to the left, and they're funded by a certain organization, you see how they kind of, I misspoke. They're coming back. It's the same thing with our judicial system, because who are the people that incite these changes? Who are the people who allow for these things? And who are the organizations that get let off all the time? And like Crichton said, yes, indeed, we can see them offshore. We can see them in all of the countries all over the world. When corporations go into communities, when they go into, countries or whatever, they run stuff. Okay. So what we're looking at right now is, how is our judicial system being impacted by what's happening in Georgia, by what's happening with this pipeline situation that Biden is trying to change? What's happening with the prison situation, which we see the prison situation is not going to change because they're the ones that provide all of that free work to corporations. So that's not going to change. Okay. Why can we never defund the police? Because there are major organizations that stand to gain by providing military guns and all kinds of stuff to the police. They protect them. It is not in their best interest. So when we start talking about justice and all this kind of stuff, justice is like, that's just like a buzzword that make white people feel good. Okay. We don't, as Black people, we don't understand that word in the terms that they have used to describe it. We're using words that have definitions from people who don't have our best interests at heart. So I can't use that word I can't use that word for me or anybody that looks like me. I can't use justice. I can't use politics. I can't use voting. I can't use any of those words because they don't mean the same. And until we understand what it means for us, then we're just kind of having the conversation.
So then what words can I use?
Until I'll tell you what word. Until white prosecutors who prosecute innocent black people start having to pay for when they don't turn over evidence, or for when they are derelict in their duties, and until people like Trump go to jail for all of the foolishness that he's done, we are living in a Looney Tune world. I don't know why we think this world is by any stretch of the imagination normal or moral or even sane. We are living in the midst of insanity, and we act like this is how it's supposed to be. Give me a break. These crooks who perpetrate these things and get away with it in the halls of look at this Marjorie Taylor Greene. Is that her name? How in a sane world does a kook like that get into Congress and stay in Congress? I mean, we could just go on and on and on, but this has become the norm, and we have become used to it. As long as things are running that way, no progress will ever be made.
Okay, so I'm glad you mentioned her. I want you guys to think about her platform. And this goes directly to my point. Think about her platform. What is her platform? Does anybody know what her platform is?
I think reptilians are a part of it.
Yeah, but it's all about like guns and being able to strap things on and all kinds of stuff, right? Okay, who do you think funded her?
NRA.
The NRA. Think about how she gets into wherever it is literally clear. Every single congressperson you look at, you just look at their platform and you know what organizations are funding them. And you know how they're going to vote. And none of it is to our benefit. So, and you can talk about Kamala, you can talk about Biden. Oh, yeah. But how many conversations are they having with people like us to know what they need to do for people like us?
And this is why when it comes to unity, a lot of my thinking goes toward, I wish the Black community had lobbyists that just worked for us, because that's how other communities do it. You put all your money together to hire lobbyists. I mean, we had tobacco out here. We knew it was killing people. They had really convincing people who knew other people. And I want the same convincing guy. Can the
Black people are kind of
black folk? Can they come help us?
We're satisfied to let the
Let me ask you about the efforts. Let me ask you about the efforts of those who have tried to lobby.
Who in a sane world comes to some committee meeting and says, you know what? What about if we say you can't give anybody food or water when they're standing in the line? Well, are we in Mayberry RFD? I mean, what the?
No, that is a Looney Tune world.
But you know what? That's not even the worst part of that bill. But that's not even the worst part of that bill. The worst part of that bill is that now the Republican Congress of Georgia can make the decision as to who wins, regardless of how many votes.
Yeah, but the point that I'm making has to do with we need to accept that we're living in a very demented world, right? Who came up with that, and who was smoking the weed with them and say, yeah, that's a great idea? I mean, come on, it had to be Barney Fife, Google Pop, and Golden.
It might all just be a simulation. So
we're in the Matrix alley. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, we might be. We might be. We're getting close to time to close, guys. We're going and going and going. We're getting close to time to close. I want to ask this last question. We're going to turn it over to McBride to give us our wrap up. Now, there are individuals, like the NBA. When the whole George Floyd thing happened, the NBA, they were in the bubble and they decided to boycott, and then all these things came out of the bubble, and some things that they were trying to get passed in Congress, and teams weren't playing and all this. Do you applaud the efforts of athletes? Because a lot of the things that we're talking about, we're saying that Black people need to unite and that we need to pull our resources. Now, these are individuals with resources. Do you applaud their efforts? And how much do we need to call on people like Oprah, who is a billionaire, Michael Jordan, who is a billionaire, Bob Johnson, who's a billionaire, and there's some other Black billionaires. How much do we need to call on them to take up the mantle? And can we even trust them and to rely on them to do some of these things? Or have they gotten where they are because of compromises and giving in? So how do we pull our resources together? Do you applaud those who have tried to do things? And how much should we rely on those who have resources to try and help in this regard?
Well, first of all, I would not call on Bob Johnson for anything. I'm just dropping that there. Go ahead, the rest of you.
Well, I think that people,
I think you know. For those of you who understand what I'm saying, you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Drop that one. The rest of them, maybe we can maybe talk about that, but not Bob. Okay, go ahead.
so most certainly, we need everyone on board. I think we have had a long and rich history of athletes standing up for the cause of racial and social justice. You know, earlier before we came on, you know, the conversation was about unity. We don't need everyone to be saying necessarily the same thing. What we need is functional unity. We just need to say, all right, this is the one thing, the one platform, the one objective that we're on. We can have other political views, but if we have functional unity, then, you know, we can go into a particular direction to kind of elevate the community. And I feel like people who, not to throw such a broad net, but oftentimes people who have made it in this nation, Black people, tend to take a very, I don't know, they take an approach that seems as though they have forgotten the real struggle, you know? And I think, you know, that's kind of a critique that we need to keep out there of rich people, even though rich Black folks, because again, they're watching their dollar, they're watching their pockets, and you know, fail to speak up most times for the cause.
Like I said, courage. We need people who hold themselves accountable and who have the courage to take that risk. I like what LeBron is doing. I mean, you know, he's starting with that grassroots thing. I can dig it. I can dig it. I like what Michael Jordan did with those healthcare centers in some of the most impoverished neighborhoods where he's from. Things like that, they're good. And when we start seeing more people do it, then it starts to kind of house us in a way where, okay, we're taking care of our own. Now let's start moving to the next level of, well, I mean, not now, but once we see a lot of that happening, then we can start moving to the next level of that civic unity, that civic engagement. But once, whilst people still can't vote because they have records, and while people can't do certain things because they, you know, these little arbitrary reasons, that civic situation is not going to work. But yeah, I can dig it with the athletes and with the famous rich people.
Yeah,
except for
I think there's a lot of wealthy.
Go ahead.
I think there's a lot of wealthy Black folk that are playing their part, because I think it looks different. Some people give money, some people give their talent. You know, Beyonce wrote, you know, did her whole album and got a lot of flexibility to really lean into, you know, Black Orishas and to be able to describe the Black diaspora in a way that Disney never would have allowed to. I mean, literally the only movie they gave us was a little lion. They would barely even give us a human movie. And Beyonce, you know, was able to do that. And so did she give millions of dollars to a candidate? I don't know. But I think that we can't paint with too broad a brush. And I think there's a lot of people, I mean, looking at the legacy that Nipsey Hussle left behind, looking at the, like, even Kanye West in his own way, he's trying, y'all. He'll figure it out. But I mean, I think that there's a lot. I know. I have faith in Kanye in the future. Right now, I'm not sure. But
will he make it though? Will he make it there?
I'm putting all of my positive intentions
Hey,
toward his.
faith is a powerful thing. He just might.
Yeah, I have faith in him. But we'll see. But not today. But and so I think that there are wealthy Black folk who are doing their part. Also, because sometimes just being present, just existing, gives inspiration to other youth in the future. Because this isn't about us. I don't look at this as being an issue of me. My life. This is probably going to be my life. And I feel like I'm pretty young still. The things that I am doing, I am sowing for a future that I don't see yet. I'm not doing this for me. I'm not doing this for the next 10 years. I'm not doing this for the next 50 years. I'm doing this for the next 200 years. How do we set a trajectory for the Black community that sets us up for the future? How do we create funds now? How do we create behaviors and practices and traditions now that set us up for a future, wherever it may be, of success? It's not for me. I don't look at any of this for being in the next election or the next two elections. This isn't about me.
Yeah, my concern has to do with the nature of change. So we can certainly create better conditions within the mess that we are in, which is what a lot of people with money are doing, because the same structure, you know, that has been so oppressive for so many is the structure that has enabled them to get their wealth, right? And how many people are trying to cut off the limb once they get out on it, right? So the issue becomes what we are talking about when we talk about change. Now, I think substantive change is a change in attitude, mindset, and worldview. It has to begin with our children and their children. We need a change of attitude about how we allow white folk to do the things they do and get away with it. That's where it needs to begin. There has to be a holding to account. I mean, all of these problems stem from the fact that either we are not sufficiently motivated or we just allow folk to walk over us. Because folk will not walk over you if you don't let them, and we let them. And so we think that by, people who, listen, didn't they clip Oprah's wings? I mean, come on now. How far can LeBron go? As long as he's doing nice things within the mess, but not trying to clean up the mess, he'll be okay. So let's keep it real. If we're talking about real structural change, white folk are not going to sit back and let you do it. They will cheat before they let you do it. You will register all the voters in the world, and then they'll change the rules. It's time to wake up and understand what's really going on. White folk have a deep sickness that must be addressed. It doesn't mean that I hate white folk any more than I hate the heart patient in the hospital. It means that I acknowledge that a sickness exists, and that if it is not addressed, it will become a contagion even more than it already has.
Amen. Amen. We're going to cut it right there. I think this is a conversation that has no end because it's so deep. There's so many aspects to it. And once we get into one aspect, we find 10 more. I'm going to turn it over to my partner, McBride, to give us our wrap up. Maybe we'll have this crew back at another time because they always bring so much fire. McBride, take it away.
Wow. What do we want? Change. And when do we want it? Now. This is the conversation that we are talking about, guys. And man, I wish I had the Looney Tunes theme song to be playing right now because Crichton has it right. Literally. I mean, when you just look at the disparities and you look at all of the facts and you see all of the injustices going on, I literally can see the orange screen and all of the Looney Tune characters coming through with all of the different white figures who, as our panelists have said, just continue to change the rules as you and I get along. Does that mean that things are hopeless? Does that mean that that regardless of what you and I do, nothing can be done or nothing can be changed? No. Because history lets us know that change is inevitable. That's the one thing you can count on. It's going to happen. So what does that mean you and I must do? And you may realize right now that I'm actually not re-quoting anything that everyone has actually said. It actually means that you and I probably have to stop being so itchy-eared, looking for drama, ready to be a part of these kinds of conversations and start putting our hands to work to make sure that, as Dr. Ali has said, we work for the next generation. Because facts is right now, Donald Duck is leading the way and his buddies behind them are doing a fantastic job of making sure the Roadrunner doesn't get past that old Wile E. Coyote. The facts are this, guys. We've got to put our hands to work. We can't just sit here. We can't just say, oh, yeah, we voted now to make things happen. But then take a look at Georgia. And it was very interesting. I got to go back to Crichton again. He actually said, listen, we be boycotting all the time, but those boycotts actually affect Black people. So the All-Star game's not going to be in Georgia and some of these things. But who works in those stadiums where all of these people come to see these games? That would be you and I, because they ain't really going to have their kids working over there. And if they are, they'll be upstairs. And you and I would be on the floor with a flashlight saying, is that your seat? Is that your, oh, they work. Oh, okay, cool. But now you don't have a job simply because we're trying to make things work out. Listen, the money is where it is. So if it ain't Black owned, Black filled, I say, don't even spend your money there. And watch this. You may say, oh, I wanted to do that, but then that Black business didn't do it well for me. They didn't serve me well. Listen, write them a review. Talk to them, the manager. Say, hey, look, man, I want to support your business, but you got to fix some things. And then work with them through the process. We're not asking for you to turn on a dime. We're asking for you to begin to make those changes. I'm going to go back to something, and you guys didn't see this, but Dr. Randy put this in our private chat. He said the Black Panther movement had a plan. I'm going to just read you some of the parts of it because it makes a hell of a difference. He says, we want freedom. And we want power to determine the destiny of the Black community. We want full employment for our people. We want an end to robbery by the white man and our communities. We want an end to police brutality immediately. And I just read 3 of them. And they hit right where we are on today. And so if you were listening to this thing and you heard me say, hey, yeah, I mean, should we direct the hands of those who want to be out there rioting? Listen, brothers and sisters, we don't want no bloodshed. And if it's going to be bloodshed, rest assured, it shouldn't be ours. I'm just saying, we don't want you, young person, out there where they can actually shoot you. But where we need you to be is in the courthouses, in those Senate rooms. We need you to go to school, get educated so that you can be president. And when you president, forget being president for all people. Be president for Black people, because that's what we need. I'm signing out. That's my time. Be mad if you want to, but I'm Black.
Amen. I appreciate that, Big Prod. Another fire wrap up. Amen. I want to remind everybody, of course, you know, I am a Christian, so I have to give you the Christian perspective. That we know that a lot of things exist because of sin. Now it's both and, not either or, that you have to still try to fight to correct the ills in society and still work with individuals to redeem them from sin. It's not either or, it's both and. So continue to go out there and fight and be an example. Do what you can. Amen. We're going to close out with a word of prayer. Father in heaven, I want to thank you for being with us, blessing us throughout this conversation. And Lord, there's a lot of ills in society, and I pray that we would do what we can to correct them, to encourage people to move and to make change, and continue to direct people to you so that they can find that redemption from sin. We look forward to the time when you come again and we don't have to deal with any of this mess and this foolishness that we're dealing with in the world right now. Continue to bless all those that are part of our panel in their daily lives, and bless their family as well. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. May God bless each and every one of you.